The stage lights shimmered like a galaxy of hopes. 1,000 faces stared ahead, waiting for another dreamer to walk out and risk everything for a moment of truth. And then, a small shadow appeared behind the curtains. He was just a boy, 15, maybe 16. A faded shirt, slightly torn at the sleeve. Shoes a little too big. But his eyes carried a lifetime of stories that no teenager should ever have to live. The host leaned toward him with a gentle smile. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "My name is Ethan," he whispered. His voice cracked, the mic trembling in his hand. "And I'm here to sing for my mom." A soft murmur rippled through the audience. Simon raised an eyebrow. Amanda folded her hands. Everyone expected another sweet talent story, but this one felt different. Backstage, behind the glowing curtain, Ethan's mother sat in a wheelchair. A small oxygen tube framed her face, and every breath she took seemed like a battle she refused to lose. She smiled at her son through the monitor, a fragile, glowing smile that said, "I'm proud of you already." The music director nodded. The first piano note filled the air, slow, haunting, like a heartbeat remembering pain. Ethan closed his eyes, and then he began to sing. His voice wasn't the strongest. It shook, it cracked, but it carried something the world hadn't heard in a long time: truth. He sang about promises, about sitting by a hospital bed holding a hand that was growing colder every day. About whispering to the stars at night, hoping they'd carry a message to heaven before it was too late. The camera cut to the judges, and even Simon, usually stone-faced, blinked a little too long. Amanda covered her mouth. The crowd leaned forward, as if afraid to breathe too loudly and break the spell. Each note felt like a heartbeat. Each word, a confession. And somewhere in the middle of the song, Ethan's voice broke completely. He lowered his head, shoulders trembling. The music stopped. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the mic. "I promised Mom I wouldn't cry." For a few seconds, silence ruled the entire arena. Not a single cough, not a single whisper. Then, a clap. One person in the front row stood up. Then another. And within moments, the hall was thunderous, a standing ovation that shook the floor. But Ethan didn't move. He looked down, ashamed, tears running freely now. He thought he had ruined everything. And that's when Amanda leaned forward. Her voice echoed softly through the speakers. "Ethan, look at me." He lifted his eyes. "You didn't fail," she said, her own voice trembling. "You just reminded us why music exists." Ethan froze. The words hit him like warmth after a long winter. She looked at the other judges, Simon, Sophia, Howie. And before anyone could say a word, Amanda stood up. Her hand hovered over the golden button in front of her. The crowd screamed even before she pressed it. But when her palm came down, slam! A shower of golden confetti exploded from the ceiling, filling the stage with light, color, and magic. Ethan gasped. He looked up, tears turning into disbelief. Gold rained down on him like heaven's applause. His mother, backstage, covered her face and sobbed. Crew members surrounded her, some crying too, because everyone knew what this moment meant. It wasn't just about music. It was about love winning after everything else had failed. Ethan ran to the edge of the stage, arms open wide, as if trying to hug the entire world. The audience kept cheering his name. And in that roar, he heard something deeper, his mother's silent voice, whispering, "You did it, my boy. You finally did it." When the confetti finally settled, Amanda walked onto the stage. She hugged him gently and whispered something the mic didn't catch, but Ethan nodded, clutching the golden glitter in his hands like a sacred treasure. He looked at the judges, then the audience, and said, "My mom once told me, Ethan, when you sing, don't try to sound perfect. Just make people feel something." I guess she was right. The crowd melted. Tears, smiles, and cheers all at once. Backstage, the camera caught his mother being wheeled toward him. Ethan saw her, jumped off the stage, and ran into her arms. No words, just tears and laughter blending together. In that moment, every person in that hall, the judges, the cameraman, the crowd, felt something rare, pure humanity. Because the truth is, the golden buzzer wasn't for a performance. It was for a son's love, for a mother's strength, for the unspoken message that no pain, no illness, no fear can silence the bond between hearts that truly care. As they left the stage, Simon, known for his sharp comments, whispered to Amanda, "You know, I think we just witnessed something bigger than talent tonight." Amanda smiled softly, eyes still wet. "Yeah," she said, "we witnessed love, and somewhere in the middle of all the noise, Ethan turned one last time toward the crowd and waved. He didn't see fame, or victory. He saw faces shining with tears, hearts opened, strangers who suddenly felt like family. That night, millions watched his clip online. People shared it not because it was perfect, but because it was real. It reminded them that sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is stand on a stage full of strangers and sing through the pain. When the confetti settled and the applause faded, Ethan's world changed overnight. Within hours, his audition clip spread across the internet like wildfire. Millions watched the trembling boy who sang through his tears. Millions cried with him. Millions whispered the same words across the world, "That kid has a heart of gold." News channels replayed his performance. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. Strangers sent letters, gifts, and prayers. But in the middle of all that noise, Ethan stayed quiet. Because the only voice he truly wanted to hear was the one that came from behind that hospital curtain, his mother's. It was 6 a.m. when Ethan gently pushed open the door to his mother's hospital room. Sunlight spilled across the white sheets, touching her face with a soft glow. She looked weak, paler than the last time he'd seen her, but her eyes still carried that same warmth, that same infinite strength. She smiled, whispering, "I saw you, sweetheart. I saw everything. You were beautiful." Ethan couldn't hold back his tears. He knelt beside her bed, clutching her hand. "Mom, I did it. You heard the buzzer. They loved it. They loved us." Her fingers squeezed his softly. "Promise me something," she said. "Don't sing for the world. Sing for the hearts that are breaking quietly, just like yours once did." Those words sank deep into Ethan's soul. He didn't know it yet, but they would shape the rest of his life. Weeks passed. The Golden Buzzer performance turned Ethan into a global name. Talk shows called him the Miracle Boy. Sponsors lined up with contracts thicker than books. But fame, as always, came with a price. Everywhere he went, cameras followed. Reporters asked him to cry a little for better ratings. Producers wanted him to sing that same sad song again and again. At first, Ethan agreed. He thought he owed it to his fans. But every time he performed, he felt like a stranger inside his own story. Because the boy who sang for his mother wasn't trying to be famous, he was trying to say goodbye. One night, after another TV appearance, Ethan sat alone in his dressing room. The lights above the mirror flickered. He stared at his reflection, a tired, older version of himself, hiding behind makeup and smiles. He whispered, "Is this what she wanted for me?" And then, from the corner of his bag, he saw it. A small note, folded carefully between the pages of his music book. It was his mother's handwriting. "If the lights ever blind you, close your eyes and remember, love doesn't need a stage." A week later, his mother's condition worsened. The doctors said the cancer had spread. They said the treatments weren't helping anymore. Ethan left everything, the interviews, the shows, the fame. He sat by her hospital bed day and night, holding her hand, humming softly the same lullaby she once sang to him. Sometimes she would wake up and smile weakly. Sometimes she would drift in and out, whispering words only he could hear. And every time he sang, her heartbeat steadied, even for a moment. One evening, when the sun dipped behind the city, she looked at him and said, "Do you know why I wanted you to sing?" He shook his head, tears blurring his sight. "Because," she whispered, "your voice makes pain sound like hope." And that night, she closed her eyes and didn't open them again. The room fell silent. Machines kept beeping, but the sound felt distant, meaningless. Ethan held her hand for hours, his heart refusing to accept what his mind already knew. After the funeral, the world expected him to return to the stage. But Ethan disappeared. No one saw him for months. Rumors spread. Some said he quit music. Some said he broke down. The truth was simpler. He was learning how to breathe again. He walked through parks where she used to take him as a child. He sat by lakes, writing songs no one would ever hear. And sometimes, he'd look at the sky and whisper, "Mom, can you hear me?" One evening, a charity organization reached out. They were hosting a benefit concert for children fighting cancer. They asked Ethan if he could perform just one song. At first, he said no. He hadn't sung since the funeral. But then he remembered her voice. "Don't sing for the world. Sing for the hearts that are breaking quietly." So he said yes. The night of the concert, there were no flashing lights, no confetti, no big stage. Just a small room filled with children, nurses, and parents, people who understood pain too well. Ethan walked up to the mic, took a deep breath, and said, "This song is for anyone who's ever loved someone they couldn't keep." And then he sang. It wasn't the same song from his audition. This one was new, a soft melody that carried the sound of healing, not hurt. Every note felt like a prayer. Every lyric, a promise that love never truly dies, it just changes form. When he finished, there was silence again. But it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that happens when hearts are too full to speak. A little girl in the front row wiped her tears and whispered, "I want to sing like you when I grow up." Ethan smiled, and for the first time since his mother's passing, that smile reached his eyes. After the show, a reporter asked him, "Ethan, after everything you've been through, what keeps you singing?" He thought for a moment, then looked straight into the camera. "Because somewhere out there," he said, "someone's holding on to their last bit of hope. And if my song can make them hold on a little longer, that's enough for me." The clip went viral again. But this time, it wasn't about the fame. It was about faith. People around the world wrote messages. "You reminded me to call my mom. You helped me forgive someone. You made me believe in kindness again." Ethan didn't just become a singer. He became a voice for everyone who had ever lost, and learned to love again anyway. Years later, Ethan stood backstage at another talent show, but this time, as a guest performer. A new contestant walked on stage, nervous, scared, clutching a picture of her sick father. Ethan watched her from the wings and smiled softly. When she began to sing, her voice cracked, just like his had all those years ago. And without hesitation, Ethan ran to the judge's table. He pressed the golden buzzer himself. Gold rained down once again, and as he looked up at the falling confetti, he whispered, "This one's for you, Mom." The golden confetti slowly drifted down like falling stars. The young girl on the stage stood frozen, tears glistening in her eyes. And there, among the crowd's roar, stood Ethan, older now, calmer, his heart no longer broken, but rebuilt. For the first time, he understood what his mother meant years ago. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about being seen. It was about making someone feel less alone. As the crowd cheered, Ethan's eyes lifted toward the ceiling lights, the same golden glow he'd once stood beneath. He smiled softly and whispered, "Full circle, Mom, we did it." That night, when the show ended and the cameras turned off, Ethan sat alone in his dressing room again. The same place where years ago, he had once cried in silence. But this time, the silence felt different. Peaceful. On the wall hung a framed photo of his mother, the one he carried with him to every performance. He looked at her picture and said quietly, "I kept singing, Mom. For them, for you, for everyone who needed to believe again." And maybe it was just the hum of the air conditioner. Or maybe it was something greater. But he swore he heard her voice, faint and loving. I never stopped listening. Months passed. Ethan launched a small foundation in his mother's name, the Melody of Hope. Its mission was simple: to help children battling illnesses find healing through music. He didn't build a fancy studio or big production house. Just a small room filled with instruments, laughter, and kids who still believed in miracles. Every weekend, he'd visit them, no cameras, no crowds. He'd sit on the floor with a guitar and say, "All right, who wants to make some noise today?" And together they'd sing, off-key, loud, messy, but real. Because that's what music was meant to be. In one corner, a little boy with no hair, from chemotherapy, once asked him, "Ethan, did singing make your mom better?" Ethan paused, smiled sadly, and said, "No, buddy, but it made me brave enough to face losing her." The boy nodded, as if he understood completely. Then he whispered, "Then I'll sing too. Maybe it'll make my dad brave." And right there, Ethan realized, his mom's dream had become his purpose. A year later, the same show that made him famous invited him back, this time, not as a contestant, but as the closing performer for the season finale. The stage was bigger now, the lights brighter. But Ethan's heart was steady. He walked out wearing a simple white shirt and a golden pin shaped like a small heart, his foundation symbol. When the host asked, "What will you be singing tonight?" Ethan smiled. "It's not just a song," he said. "It's a letter, to everyone who's ever lost someone, but never stopped loving them." The hall went silent. Then, the music began. A gentle piano, echoing just like that first audition years ago. Ethan closed his eyes and began to sing. His voice had changed, deeper now, stronger. But still carried that same trembling truth. He sang about grief, about healing, about finding light in the cracks of loss. He sang for the mothers, the sons, the strangers who still believed that love doesn't end when a heartbeat does. The camera panned across the crowd. People were crying openly, holding hands, whispering prayers. The judges sat speechless, tears streaming down their faces. And at the end of the song, as the final note faded into silence, Ethan looked up toward the sky and smiled. In his closing words, Ethan said, "Once, I stood on this stage as a scared boy trying to make his mom proud. Now, I stand here as a man who's learned that love doesn't need a stage. It just needs a heart willing to keep singing." He paused, his eyes wet, his smile gentle. "If you're watching this," he continued, "and you're hurting, or missing someone, please remember, the people you've lost haven't gone anywhere. They live in your kindness, in your courage, in every song you sing to the world." The audience rose again. No judges, no scores, just humanity clapping for love itself. And as Ethan walked off stage, the lights dimmed. But the echo of his song lingered in the hearts of millions who had just witnessed not another performance, but a story of a boy who turned his pain into purpose. Later that night, long after the show ended, Ethan stood outside, looking at the stars. The city lights flickered below, but above him, there was peace. He took a small piece of golden confetti from his pocket, the same one from his first audition years ago. He tossed it into the air and whispered, "Thank you, Mom." The wind carried it upward, and for a brief second, it shimmered in the moonlight like an angel's wing. And that's how Ethan's story ended. Not with applause, but with a quiet reminder. Sparkles, sometimes the most powerful golden buzzer isn't on a stage. Sparkles, it's the one that life presses inside your heart, when you choose to love, to forgive, to begin again. Music can heal, even when medicine can't. And love can echo long after the last note fades.